Hey guys, can you understand me okay? Is that good? I'm really excited to present this to you today. I've had a lot of conversations over this past week with people about incident response. And there are a lot of different takes on this. Most people say, oh yeah, we just need better monitoring. We just need better monitoring. And then, I go and talk to various different projects and I ask them, what kind of monitoring are you doing today? Crickets usually. Right? And they're not exactly prepared for when they actually get wrecked, right? And we're going to be talking about exactly what wrecked means today. Now, first and foremost, I probably should introduce myself. My name's Heidi. I'm on the Unit 0 X team at Coinbase. Our big goal here is to make Web3 more safe. As Coinbase is getting more into the Web3 space, we want to make sure that we are creating sort of the most safest dApps, but also making the space a lot more safe. One thing that you might say is, well, wait a second, why does Coinbase care about Web3 security? Yeah, sure, you guys are launching Base, but why do you care about maybe the Euler hack? Well, first and foremost, any ecosystem threat is bad for us, right? It's bad PR for us. But there's also fallout from things like the Euler hack that you might not think about. For example, all the CB ETH being drained, right? There's also other fallout from these sort of events also happening. For example, a threat actor might want to cash out with us. So there are a bunch of different facets that we care about and we really are interested in making sure that dApps in the ecosystem do not get wrecked. Now, I've got a couple different things on the agenda today, but we're going to keep it really light. First, we want to define as what does it mean to get wrecked or to get pwned, right? After that, I just want to get us set up with basic 10 questions you as a project should be asking yourself in terms of being prepared for getting wrecked, right? I'm not saying you need a whole monitoring plan today. That's a little overambitious, I think, for a lot of projects today. So let's keep it easy. And then, last but not least, you might be asking yourself the question of, oh my God, my dApp just got wrecked. What do I do? How do I even set up a war room? How do I even think about incident response? So let's get started. What do we mean by getting pwned? Now, I want to make it very clear, and I loved the presentation right before mine from Immunify, because getting pwned or wrecked is not the same thing as an incident. An incident is kind of what, Immunify was talking about, where a white hat or maybe, someone on the dev team might actually find a bug. Yeah, sure, it might be a critical bug, but it doesn't lead to funds loss of users, right? And so let's define getting pwned. Now, getting pwned will depend on your dApp in and of itself and your dApp's risk tolerance. That might be defined by the jurisdiction that you're in. It might be defined by your lawyers. It might be defined by what your total TVL is, and also maybe your LPs. But generalized, pwned basically means the unexpected, sudden, and significant loss of user funds. Now, we're going to go into all of the specifics that I've underlined here, but that's the basics of it. And I think we can all agree on this definition because it also includes things like rugs, right? It includes things like hacks too. It's very broad, and it's done for that reason, right? Because we need to all come to an agreement as what do we mean here? Now, how do we think about getting pwned? Now, this is all going to be, as I talked about before, is based on your project's risk tolerance. So what is an unexpected event for you? So that might be the USDC dPeg. I don't think anyone in this room saw that coming until, the banks, I don't know, on that Friday went under, but I don't think anyone in this room expected that. What's a sudden loss for you? How do you define that? What percentage of TVL would you actually classify that as, right? Or would you say a sudden loss could even be something like maybe losing funds from your treasury? That's something that you want to think about, right? So, for example, a sudden loss might be suddenly 1 million BNB being withdrawn from the BSC bridge. Now, initially, when this BNB bridge hack went down, I didn't think that 1 million withdrawal was that bad. I was like, oh, it's probably just some big trader. It was only until, I want to say it was less than 5 minutes later, there was another withdrawal for 1 million BNB, and I remember thinking, this probably isn't just a big trader whale. Now, the last thing you also want to think about is, what's a significant loss? I didn't think that 1 million BNB was that significant of a loss at the time, but maybe, for example, in the case of Euler, that 34 million USDC that was withdrawn from the pool, that was the entire, that was the entire Euler, pool of USDC. they had no more money left. That is a significant loss. And so when you're just as a project, start thinking about those 3 very high-level things. Now, many of you probably have been in incidents, have been in war rooms before, but I want to bring us back to the more basic cybersecurity stuff and how the industry kind of thinks about incident response. And then we're going to try to apply it to Web3 and all of the kind of pitfalls that we might see with this kind of flowchart. Now, first, in the traditional sense, there's some preparation that you do for incident response. That could be doing a whole bunch of documentation. That could be writing playbooks. That could be creating a contact list. That could be even starting to monitor, right? Next, you have detection. So that is all about your monitoring program, setting up alerts, etc. Followed by patching, obviously, the bug. So you find a bug, you want to triage it, you patch it. Followed by, obviously, the recovery. Okay, now you've patched the bug, you want to maybe bring whatever your dApp is back, you bring it back. And last but not least, you also have lessons, which you then are going to apply to your preparation. Okay, this sounds all great, right? But how is Web3 a little bit different from this? Well, first off, detection. We all know, right, from crypto Twitter, that a lot of the detection is done publicly. That's not generally a thing that happens in Web 2 or in traditional cybersecurity, where you're literally put on notice by the entire community that something is up. Another thing that's also different is when you're actually thinking about applying a patch. Let's say, for example, you're operating a bridge. Your bridge goes down, right? And you want to, okay, you found the bug, you want to bring it back. Well, when you bring that back, when you want to bring the bridge back, you want to create sort of recovery, right? What do you think is going to happen? Everyone is going to flee from your bridge. You will not have liquidity anymore, right? And so there's a very strange kind of balance that you kind of need to reach when thinking about how you're actually going to go about doing a recovery, right? The other thing, too, with recovery is it's not just bringing that bridge back online. It's also recovering whatever funds you might have lost, right? And funds recovery is a whole other subset, whole other story. And finally, with lessons, it's not just that, the lessons are learned by the bridge, in this case, it's in and of itself, but it's also by the wider ecosystem. We constantly are taking away lessons from various different exploits as to how we can build better dApps in the future, and I'm sure you guys all are as well. And that's something very different from Web 2. Sometimes Web 2 companies will publish incidents that occur, but a lot of times they'll keep it as quiet as possible, right? Because they don't want the bad PR. But of course, because everything's public on chain, you kind of can't help it here, which is cool. Now, let's go through this exercise real quick with 2 examples. And I actually chose these examples because I thought they'd be a little different, but in reality, they're not. So, and before I get into that, one thing that I also want to mention is that today I'm only going to be covering mostly these 2 sections here that are highlighted in red. Detection, we've seen a ton of different companies do a way amazing job of talking about monitoring, and I think they do such a good job, there's no point in me rehashing that all over again. So let's go into the Nomad bridge example that happened last August. Now, we don't know what kind of preparation they did for this kind of event. We can assume very little, though, probably, but we don't know what kind of preparation they did. Now, one thing with Nomad that was kind of fun or problematic was they didn't really detect it. They didn't detect when suddenly massive withdrawals were happening in one specific block that happened, I want to say, around 9 p.m. That night. And unfortunately, crypto Twitter saw this. And I don't know if you guys remember in that one block, there was one threat actor who was a part of the group of attackers that was really hell-bent on participating in that initial block in the attack, and they made the attack public. Because initially it wasn't, and we couldn't unhash it, but this attacker was just very greedy and wanted to push through their transaction. And that, of course, started the free-for-all, where everyone could basically copy-paste the code, just update, right, the input data to include, obviously, their destination address, and boom, they could withdraw a ton of WETH, wrap BTC, and all sorts of currencies. Now, one thing that I have here is that it took the team 3 hours to respond, right? in reality, and I updated this slide actually while sitting over there, that's not actually the case, because I was going through the Nomad tweets. The team didn't really respond. What in reality happened is, if you look at the bridge contract, is the bridge contract just got drained within 3 hours, right? Of course, the attackers initially went for the highest denominations, right? But once they had gone for the highest value coins like WETH or Rekt Bitcoin, they then kind of waited around, and then they went for like lower value currencies like cards, for example. So they didn't really patch the problem. And then it took them like almost an entire day later, right? Because remember, other people are copy-pasting this hack. And I remember that there were several people in various group chats I was in, they were like, hey, shouldn't we be withdrawing funds from this bridge as well? Because we can just hand back this money if they publish a recovery address, right? It takes Nomad an entire day to publish a recovery address. And even so, it's been almost a year now since the incident. They've only recovered about 17% of all the stolen funds. That's a very, very small amount. And of course, Nomad has never come back. In fact, they've hardly made a statement since then. I don't know if anyone from the Nomad team is here, but I'd love to talk with you to learn whether or not if you ever are considering coming back. But to me, you guys are just ghosts at this point. Now, okay, let's talk about something more recent, right? I thought, okay, we'll go for an older case. Now let's go for a newer one, multi-chain. That literally happened like, what, a week and a half ago? Okay, so first and foremost, preparation. Let's think about preparation. They've been hacked 3 times, so let's hope they prepared, right? This is hack number 4, by the way, guys. So let's hope they did some preparation. Not sure, though. They've never published any of it. Now, of course, again, how was this hack? Right? We don't actually know if this was a hack. We think it might be a CCP. It's still kind of unclear based on Twitter, based on what they've written on Twitter up until now. But again, the attack was detected by the public. Who identified this? Oh, it was PeckShield. PeckShield at 12:06 p.m. UTC detected this on the 6th. This is kind of important because it took them literally almost 12 hours later to then respond, right, on Twitter to say that funds have been moved to an unknown address. That's pretty bad. That is really, really bad, right? So it was detected by the public, and then it took almost, I want to say it was like maybe a couple hours later, funds were frozen then. So we kind of tried to recover those funds. And why do I mean we? It's because some of the funds were frozen on USDC. So that was the one thing that, that can be done in some of these instances where protocols get wrecked or dApps get wrecked, is that certain assets are freezable. So USDC, which is a conglomeration of Center and Coinbase, or rather Circle and Coinbase, we're able to freeze those funds. And that's something we were able to do in this case. But it took them then, it looks like an extra 3 minutes to then finally then make a post saying, hey, don't use our bridge at all, right? And by the way, if you try to use our bridge, transactions won't go through. That's pretty rough, right? It's not a good look, right? And since then, as we know, they've then published saying, hey, we're still not sure of where the funds went to, but we think it's the CCP who took them because our CEO is still gone, but it's unclear. Again, this is pretty bad response, right? And this is even, I would say that in this case, a lot of us knew what was going on. We thought that it was rapidly kind of happening. Rapid response was going on, but in reality, it wasn't. In reality, it was pretty disorganized, I would say. So once you start thinking about things in terms of this kind of flowchart, things start to seem a little bit less organized, I would say. Now, okay, now we know what a basic incident flowchart looks like. Let's talk about some questions to ask before getting pwned. And this is where I would say, once I finish talking about the slide, just take a picture of it because it'll be useful. But some questions to ask, right? First off, with monitoring. Do you have basic monitoring? Basic monitoring does not mean crypto Twitter. It does not mean creating a tweet deck of your favorite monitoring tools, your favorite auditors. They're great and all, don't get me wrong. PeckShield, Slowmiss, we all know who they are, who then publish like these insane tweets like, hey, you might want to check this transaction out tweets. That is not monitoring. Sure, that's a good interim solution. That is not monitoring. You want to have those alerts set up. You want to actually be looking at those. Next, legal/comms. This is something that I've noticed a lot of teams don't think about unless they get a little bit bigger and they actually have lawyers. But many teams, when they first start, they're literally a bunch of devs. So the question that I would ask them is, do you have a lawyer, right? Because when an incident like this goes down, there's a lot of legal liability, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But the next thing that you might want to ask yourself is, do you have pre-written comms in case of an incident like this happening? So let's say you don't have a lawyer, right? Or let's say you have a lawyer and you're kind of on a retainer with them. Have them just approve a pre-written thing just in case you ever get wrecked. Remember, in crypto, communication is key. We know with Nomad, we also know with multi-chain, that the reason that their response was so abysmal is that they weren't public about what was going on, but instead kind of let the chain speak for itself, which is not the right move ever, right? The next thing is do you have an insurance plan? Do you have any insurance plan whatsoever, and have you notified any of your users or LPs of that, right? It's not to say that you necessarily need an insurance plan, but it's something that you might want to think about. Now, the last question is a little controversial, is do you have connections to law enforcement? Now, some of you guys might be like, no, we don't want to deal with law enforcement at all. Nope, we're out of here. We're about a free financial system here. But the thing is law enforcement might come in contact to you. And you kind of don't want that. You kind of want to already have someone on your side from the get-go. It's just something worth thinking about. Next is incident planning. Do you have an incident lead? So when you have a war room, and it was really cool actually, the previous presentation here, they were talking about having a war room. Now, what I'm talking about here with incident response is going from war room all the way forward to trying to recover and actually learn from an incident, which encompasses a lot more, right? But when you're in a war room, what you need to have is an incident lead. That person needs to be ascribed to that. And I've seen various different war rooms where it's a hot potato and no one wants to take it on. Just sign someone up immediately and just say, hey, you're down for this, you gotta take all of the notes. Next, what you need to have is you need to actually have a tech lead. And what is a tech lead? A tech lead is someone who communicates with all the devs to figure out where is the bug, right? That's followed by a comm/legal person. Having someone in those war rooms is critical. They can help very quickly, help write the tweets, help send out communications, help communicate also with law enforcement, et cetera, whoever reaches out. And another question is, for incident planning is, in order for those devs to figure out where the hell the bug is, how well have you documented your infrastructure? And a lot of you guys might be sitting there, especially if you're in a smaller project, is like, we don't even have time to document it out. Like, that's a luxury that larger projects have. We just do not have that. Just start thinking about keeping it simple and doing some sort of form of documentation. And another question is do you even have a list of contacts that you can reach out to in case anything goes down? Right? And what do I mean by contacts? I mean law enforcement. I mean people like incident responders, even here in this room, who have been through various different incidents, et cetera. And last but not least, obviously, economic analysis, right? What projects have invested in you, and what are the wider ecosystem threats that might actually happen if you try to turn off your tool or your dApp, or if you try to turn it back on? And one thing that I didn't get to, but I really want to, even though I have 1 more minute left, is the main point here, which is, what if my dApp actually gets pwned? And I just want you guys to first not panic and then take pictures of these slides, because I'm going to go through them really quickly. But this is the step-by-step plan. You want to prepare. You want to set up monitoring and all this other stuff that I talked about. Then obviously you want to triage, and you want to create that team that I talked about. But here is the real step-by-step flowchart. So first off, let's say you get an alert from crypto Twitter. I don't want you to, but you probably will, right? Monitoring. And then let's say you triage it and you know that, uh-oh, we lost money. What do? Okay, so let's say you don't actually think you lost that much money. It's not that big of a deal. Not an incident. Close it. Forget about it. This is the one part of the slide that I really want you guys to take a picture of, is when you call an incident, what do? So there are 3 big areas that you want to be scoping out and you want to be asking yourself. Legal comms questions that are critical, engineering questions, but then also investigations questions, because if you get wrecked, you are going to want to try to recoup that money. You really are. And now that you guys have taken pictures of this, I want to show you guys 2 different kind of offshoots of that. Let's say you find a patch, right? You need to then start asking yourself what your liability is for implementing that patch, and do we have any insurance, and what are the wider ecosystem threats of us turning this thing back on? And last but not least, investigations-wise, we're still out all this money. Are we going to pay these people back? Are we actually going to track down this money? And then, because a lot of people like this, is they believe that when attackers try to negotiate, that maybe they're going to get money back. I would say 99% of the time, do not even bother. But in case you try to bother, I wanted to do this slide for you. Here are the questions you should be asking yourself if you want to negotiate. The main point is here, don't get distracted by negotiation. It's not worth it. And let's do some takeaways here real quick. Just prepare, prepare, prepare. That's like the main point here. And obviously conduct exercises. And if you guys want to talk to us more about some exercises we've conducted, let us know. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Heidi. We have a bit of time before lunch, or lunch is starting now, but if you guys have any questions. Yep. Okay, I'm gonna start. You can go next.
I wanted to ask, isn't it a bit unfair to assume that the public response on Twitter is correlated with the time that the team actually began to assess and respond to the incident? Because assume like if you're a project and you get an incident, then the first thing is not go to Twitter, it's like actually try and solve the issue, right?
You used to work for Nomad, no?
That is a great question, and you know what? We should give the project team some credit. Here's the problem though, the blockchain is public. All of this stuff is public. If you don't make a statement, people are going to make assumptions about you. So you may as well just make a statement, and it should just be a coverall statement like, hey, we've noticed something weird, we'll get back to you. Something along the lines of that, but something that will protect you maybe a little bit more legally. But at least that's the bare minimum. Because if you don't say anything, the assumption is you're not doing anything. Is that unfair? Yes. But have we all seen that time and time again? Absolutely.
Yeah, great talk, by the way. Do you have like an example of good incident response?
It was kind of difficult. So I was thinking initially when I was looking through the flowchart of good incident response, and a lot of times the best incident responses have been from companies like Blocksec that actually presented earlier, where they try to literally front run an attacker, right? But I didn't want to include that in this presentation, even though that's something that's very unique about this industry is that you can front run an attacker, right? And that the public is already aware and that there are companies out there doing that. But it felt a little strange to include that in there because it should be actually the project team doing that, right? So yeah.
Any other questions? Yep.
Are there monitoring tools that you recommend to help front run the attacker?
I'm going to stay unbiased here.
Fair enough. Any other questions? We've got time. Don't be shy. Well, Heidi's going to be around for a bit longer, so feel free to grab her and ask questions. Thank you so much. Epic talk. Thanks.